let them do that. My name is Britton Rogers. I'm Executive Director here at Yes Tomorrow, and it's wonderful to have you all here at our third of our speaker series for Fall 24 on connected communities. We're really excited to have RJ Thompson here with us from Vermont Huts Association to talk about this exciting topic, which I'll share a little bit more about in a second. Just a couple of details. This will run from approximately 6:30 to 7:30. We will be able to do some question and answer at the end. Do you mind if people interrupt in the middle to ask questions? Or?
Whatever feels right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah, we're warm and friendly bunch. We can help each other do this.
Yeah.
Great. We don't have to worry about a mic, so we're not going to have to worry about that for the audience. Just speak up enough so that our camera can hear you. It's not a live broadcast, but we will be putting it on our YouTube and Facebook, or just YouTube channels later.
At least YouTube.
At least YouTube, so that we can, people who missed the talk can go back and see it. We always like to welcome donations and like to ask for you to think about giving to Yes Tomorrow to support the speaker series and our other educational offerings. We couldn't do what we do without our donors, large and small, corporate and personal. We really appreciate everything that people give us. If you need to use the bathroom, go through these two doors and then it's on your left. You may have entered the building that way. I want to mention our Standby for Locals program. We've recently expanded it to all of Washington County. Standby for Locals is a program you sign up on our website, and then when space is available in upcoming courses, we release them to the Standby for Locals program, and residents of Washington County can sign up for classes at a 50% discount, which is a nice way for us to get locals in the door and have locals be able to see some of the things that we offer. And finally, I will give you a little bit of information about our speaker. RJ is, in addition to having been a former client of Yes Tomorrow several times over, of which we are very grateful, he's the executive director of the Vermont Huts Association. He lives to be in the mountains. He loves sharing his passion for the outdoors with anyone who is willing to join him on foot, skis, or bike. His love for the Green Mountains began in 2002 while studying at the University of Vermont, and after a 3-year stint in Jackson Hole, he received a Master of Science in Environmental Studies from Green Mountain College. RJ also serves on the Green Mountain Club's Camps Committee and the Musalamu Association's Board of Directors. You can tell I didn't grow up in northern New England. I probably would know that word.
It's a new one.
He has also visited hut systems across the U.S. and Europe. When RJ is inside, you can find him chasing his children around the house with his wife, Olivia. Let's welcome RJ. Thanks for being here.
Hello. As Britton said, my name is RJ. I'm Executive Director at Vermont Huts. Here to talk to you a little bit about huts and trails. So the Velomont Trail is kind of our flagship project. But before I get into kind of where we're at and where we're going and how this relates to communities, I did just want to mention that I was a Yes Tomorrow client and student, and at one point in time a client and student, and really love everything that Yes Tomorrow has going on. I think it's a really incredible resource, not just for Vermont, obviously in the valley, but for everyone who comes here and leaves with a lot more knowledge than they had when they arrived. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this cool little series. Okay, so how did Vermont Huts and Velomont get started? So like, quick history lesson I think is warranted here. So about 13 billion years ago, there was this bang, some humor on a dark night post-election. So about 8.5 years ago, myself and our other, so I'm also a co-founder of Vermont Huts, and our other co-founder, Devin Littlefield, met at a meeting at the Green Mountain Club. And we were trying to envision with other folks in the recreation world, could a year-round, four-season hut network exist here in Vermont? And if so, could any of the existing organizations kind of take on that endeavor? So the Green Mountain Club, as you all may know, has the Long Trail System and its supporting structures. Vermont Mountain Bike Association, VMBA, has dozens of chapters, mountain bike chapters across the state, primarily summer use. And then of course there's the Catamount Trail, which is a winter use primarily only trail that goes from Canada to Massachusetts for skiing. So during that meeting, about 8.5 years ago, it was determined that, this hut thing is cool, but felt like a bit of a drift for any of those organizations. So the folks around that table said, this kind of has to be its own thing. And Devin and I kind of stupidly raised our hands and said, we'll do this. And we got to work pretty quickly. We kind of did a research project, ultimately, that really analyzed what structures were out there across the state, what backcountry huts, and a hut being anything that's kind of four-sided and has a heat source, really. We kind of set the bar quite low in those early days, that were on a trail network or adjacent to a trail network that would provide some type of recreational connectivity out the door. And wouldn't you know it, there weren't really a ton of those assets out there, whether they be on private or public lands, which is why there wasn't really a hut network yet. So we then got to talking to a number of folks across the state who were kind of in positions that would know of these structures, and we started learning of a hut here that could work, or a hut there that could work. But really we needed to start laying the groundwork to build out this network. So that's kind of the hut formation, where we go through a whole bunch of stuff. They give you a lot of time, so feel free to raise your hand and ask questions throughout. We'll also do a Q&A at the end. At the same time that we were getting going, maybe a year or two later, there were a number of Vermont Mountain Bike Association chapters, so VMBA, I'm going to say VMBA, folks cool with that acronym, it's a lot to say, Vermont Mountain Bike Association. Those individuals, kind of between the towns of Killington and really here in the valley, those chapter leads had been discussing the notion of connecting their pods with a mountain bike trail. And if folks are familiar with kind of mountain biking and how it has existed in Vermont for a while, you've got pods kind of across the state, and there's spaghetti bowls that you park at a trailhead, you go ride your loops, you come back to your car, and you get home. Those VMBA chapters thought it'd be cool to connect with one another and have a ride that could go maybe from Killington up to the valley here. That conversation evolved with Vermont Huts, because wouldn't it be nice if you were doing that adventure and you also had places to stay along the way, and these huts were strategically located along that trail corridor in such a way that you could link multiple days and nights together. So Vermont Huts and Velomont kind of became married very early on, about 6 or 7 years ago. What happened then was a lot of really fun stuff. So Vermont Huts had an opportunity to construct our first backcountry hut on federal land in Green Mountain National Forest. And this is just down the road in Rochester, outside the town of Rochester. What you're seeing here is one of the boxes that was built here as part of the semester program in 2017. It wasn't placed until 2018 on federal land because we were waiting for permits to go through. All of these huts and trails that are on federal land have to go through NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. And that takes a long time because you're talking about public lands that are managed by locally, but then also at the federal level in DC. Nevertheless, this box is being held up by a large crane that you cannot see, and somehow we managed to get 2 of these boxes up a very long and windy 2.2 mile U.S. Forest Service road with bridge clearances that left about 3 inches on each side for this structure to go through. In fact, one side got a little scraped. It then sat there from about August as we finished up the work and then installed this deck. What you'll see here is a group of volunteers installing deck board here at the hut in mid to end of November. And you'll hear me say this a few times throughout the presentation. Volunteers are the backbone of recreation in Vermont. They probably don't get as much recognition as they should, but nothing that I'm talking about tonight really exists without volunteers. So if you've volunteered in the past, whether on a trail or at one of our huts, thank you very, very much, because this doesn't really happen without volunteer labor. We had to have that road plowed, I think 3 times during that month of January. It was one of the snowiest Januaries that I can remember, having been in Vermont for over 20 years. And that road, yeah, they don't plow it. It gets shut down in the winter, but we had to finish this project. So a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into our flagship hut, the Chittenden Brook Hut. And again, Tomorrow played a big part in helping us get that finished, and in fact, nearly finishing it all the way. The end result of this particular hut is what you see here. A family in a snowstorm enjoying the backcountry. So all of our huts are ADA accessible, and that just creates a better user experience for everyone. Kids and grown-ups who are older. We've had, I think, guests as young as 3 months stay in this hut and as old as like 82 years old. So the huts do provide this kind of cross-generational experience for folks to come together, enjoy a warm meal, share those experiences after a day in the mountain. So back to the Velomont Trail. How does this have anything to do with the Velomont Trail? Well, like I said, we started working closely together with the Velomont Trail and kind of took that project under our ownership because we had the kind of administrative infrastructure set up to handle that type of grant writing and administration. We thought it'd be cool to work with a local chapter in Rochester. In fact, they kind of spearheaded the trail side of the Velomont going through that community. And so that's the Ridgeline Outdoor Collective, formerly known as ROSTA. And this is the ribbon cutting ceremony from just last fall of 2023. This trail, right across the Forest Service road that was really snowy, sits the Chittenden Brook Hut. So folks can now ride on the Velomont Trail from Rochester and through Pittsfield all the way up to the Chittenden Brook Hut, connecting 2 towns along a mountain bike trail that is adaptive friendly, meaning folks who have mobility challenges and are not on your traditional 2-wheeled cycle have a special bike that allows them to get deep into the backcountry. And I'm going to show you a quick video that kind of talks a bit more eloquently about the Velomont Trail and hut experience than I have thus far. So let me just get this going for you.
High in the green mountains of Vermont, a new trail and hut system is being blazed for a new era. through rural villages, generating sustainable economic opportunity and making the trail and huts available to all. Every new hut will be energy efficient and ADA accessible. It is building strong communities around outdoor recreation. The Velomont, world-class trails and huts for a new era.
Cool. Sponsors. Oh, no, that's just us. So, what does that look like zoomed way out? This is what we call our undulating blob. It's our corridor of opportunity. It goes from Reedsboro, Massachusetts, all the way up to TBD, Canadian border. We will figure out what we're calling phase 3, which is from St. J up to the border, but somewhere around Derby is where the northern terminus of the Velomont will be. And if you took notes, it's going to be roughly 485 miles with about 30 to 45 huts along the way. And what's different about the Velomont when it comes to connecting communities is that the trail is intentionally routed into Vermont's rural towns and villages. So whereas the long trail stays high on the ridgeline, which I love and have spent many, many miles and days and nights on the long trail, and the Catamount Trail tends to stay relatively remote. There are a few areas where it does come into towns. The Velomont visioning and corridor alignment, we really wanted to make sure people could go into the backcountry, but then it dipped back down into these towns and villages. To bring folks off the trail, allow them to spend time in these communities, buy a coffee, go grab a beer wherever, but then also allow the local community members to have immediate access to that recreational asset. So no longer in these communities will folks have to get in their car and drive to a trailhead to go for a hike or bike. They can just go from town. And this is actually happening in the town of Rochester. You know, anecdotal stories. Their post person delivers mail, and you'd think that after walking all day delivering mail, you would want to go and take a break. But they go out and hike the Velomont right from the town of Rochester. They go for a walk after their job, and that's something that didn't exist, just a year or two ago for that community. So it's really, really important. And again, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So this is an after-school program in the town of Rochester that is on the Velomont. This comes basically right up from the back of the ranger station on one side of Route 100, and on the other side it kind of is behind the Stable Inn, which is a new inn that was built, just opened it's been over a year now, I think. So nevertheless, the community connectivity that has provided for the town of Rochester and also now Pittsfield has been incredible to see the locals utilizing this new resource. Like I said, it's happening, and so kind of zooming in, you think about the undulating blob. What does that look like on a micro level? I'm not sure if you can see this, but this is called the Heart of the Greens Loop. This is kind of the first multi-day section of the Velomont and Hut Network that is actually rideable or hikeable. You can stay in the Spikehorn Yurt, which is just outside of the town of Rochester. You can stay at the Chittenden Brook Hut, which is about halfway along this loop. And you may also stay at the Stable Inn at the beginning or end of your trip. Or if you're feeling very ambitious, you can do the whole loop in one day, which some folks do. This year, I think the slide's a bit old, but this year we did, I think, just under 15 miles of new or improved trail down in southern Vermont, just around where the Catamount Trail runs through Somerset Reservoir, and the southern part, just below the southern part of the Manchester district of Vermont National Forest.
Question.
Yeah.
Is the ridgeline a portion of the Velomont?
The Ridgeline Outdoor Collective, or
Well, it's like I've been on the trails, it says Ridgeline Trail.
down in Rochester?
Yeah.
Like it's just called the Ridgeline Trail, or okay.
Yeah, I'm confused by the two. connection, is it?
Sure. So Ridgeline Outdoor Collective is a VIMBA chapter.
Okay.
So it's just like the Mad River Riders or WADA or so Trail Park, like they're a chapter. And then Ridgeline Outdoor Collective is also a chapter of VIMBA. So they have, it's basically, chapters are the locals who are spearheading the mountain bike activity in those regions, those towns. And then the Ridge Trail,
I always thought
I'd have to-
Ridgeline was the trail. I thought it was part of Velomont.
yeah, Ridgeline Outdoor Collective is a chapter of VIMBA that helps locally with Velomont initiatives. Yeah. Yeah, great questions. Cool. Okay, so this is all great and fun and great for people who like to play outside, and we all know what benefits recreation brings to our minds and our bodies, but why is it actually like really important for Vermont and the environment? So if you're from Vermont or if you're visiting Vermont, roughly 70% of our land is private. That means it's vulnerable. Of course, a lot of that is in current use, but current use is not necessarily safe from fragmentation. We know that recreation can catalyze conservation. It has happened all over the state. It's happened with Long Trail. There's the Long Trail State Forest. For roughly every mile of trail in that part of the state that the Green Mountain Club works to protect, it resulted in about 400 acres of conserved land. So this project, the Velomont, has the opportunity to conserve over 200,000 acres of land, given its scope and the areas in which through which the corridor passes. You can't see it here, but when you overlay the corridor, which is this looks like it was drawn in paintbrush, like from a 1990s computer program, but anyway, this orange line overlaid with the climate migration corridor for sensitive species, they're almost aligned. It's almost as if we planned that, which we kind of did. But the point is, by creating this new recreational asset, you also open up opportunities for conservation, and we've seen that. We are seeing it already down in southern Vermont, the town of Dorset, the area the trail is going through. There were some private landowners who were thinking about conservation, and in fact, we didn't know that, but when we said, hey, the trail's kind of coming near your land, we need to get from A to B, are you guys open to just allowing that access? And they're like, we know we're actually thinking about conserving this land, can we talk? And so enter Trust for Public Land, Vermont Land Trust, et cetera, the other land trusts that exist here in Vermont, and you now have an opportunity for conservation that didn't exist. Any questions on that?
I have a question. Is what's green public land and what's white private land?
Yes, I believe that. Yes, that's why there's so much white here in Vermont.
Yeah.
And I think that's Adirondacks over here.
Yeah.
That map complements the Trust for Public Land. We work with them very closely and have kind of since the outset, but they're hoping to devote additional staff capacity specifically for this initiative to work with us and ensure that we can protect this trail and at the same time protect additional land corridors. Obviously, it's a multifaceted project, so it's not just recreation and conservation. You have the economic impact, so no need for me to spew these numbers at you, but it's pretty significant. And I think, like for Yes Tomorrow and folks who are interested in construction, this number down here seems insane. But when you think about roughly 30 to 45 huts from Camden, Massachusetts, we did one hut here through Yes Tomorrow. And we did our other hut, the Grout Pond hut, with VYCC. And so we kind of used this metric. We got this metric from the VYCC model where they developed a pro crew for us. So it was folks from like 18 to 24 years of age. And they lived effectively in the backcountry for a really long time. And they built a two-story backcountry hut, fully insulated, built to RVES standards. And we scaled that out to roughly 330 young adults that would be trained through that program if we were to adhere to that model moving forward. The trail, since it's intentionally routed into these rural towns and villages, many of those areas don't actually have lodging opportunities. So for example, the town of Randolph, the trail will come over from Rochester, and we're working with a property owner over there to acquire an existing building, renovate it to become a hostel. So it's going to be a mix of huts and hostels between Massachusetts and Canada. And so that's kind of how we arrived at those figures. Add at least 50% for inflation in the next few years. And we talked about this, or I talked about this a little bit earlier. You saw the adaptive rider, you saw the ADA accessible hut. When you build to that level on the trail in particular, you open up the outdoors to a broader set of users. So the trail is a little more buffed out, you could say. It's mostly machine built using a mini excavator, so the trail tread is like roughly 40 inches wide. And the roots and rocks are mostly not there. If they are, they're navigable. So even for walkers who are less stable, it just creates a more accessible resource for the public. And the same goes for those huts. Again, a photo of Adaptive Rider Greg Durso from the Kelly Brush Foundation out on a ride with Ridgeline Outdoor Collective folks and Vermont Adaptive Jeff Alexander, who leads a ton of great programming there. If you haven't noticed, we partner with a lot of people to make this happen. It is not just Vermont Huts and Velomont. There's hundreds of folks involved. And so speaking of accessibility, Vermont Huts runs, that's the Grout Pond Hut down in Stratton, so that's the one you can still see. This isn't snow here, these are areas of siding that needed some attention after the siding was put on. We have a forest program. It stands for Fostering Outdoor Recreation, Education, Sustainability, and Teamwork, because we like a good acronym in Vermont. We developed that program recognizing that the huts aren't free. There's a fee to stay. We're a nonprofit, but we still need to make sure that we can maintain these structures. They are affordable. They sleep anywhere from 8 to 10 folks. But for some folks, that's just still not attainable, or they don't even know it exists. So how do we get people outside who might not otherwise have that opportunity? So we developed a forest program. We partner with underrepresented Vermonters, a lot of school groups, some folks from Vermont Adaptive, and it's all free. So we bring them out to the huts for a weekend or 2 days during the week, provide them with a guide, transportation meals, etc. And I do have one other video to show you since it's a multimedia kind of night. And I'll just jump into that right now. Talk about the forest program.
There's a lot of communities out there that don't get the opportunity to come out into the backcountry. So by working with those communities and discovering what their barriers are, and then trying to erase those barriers, we're giving people an opportunity to get out here that really never got the chance to get out here. Right here is a picture of the hut we're staying in.
I think having an educator be along with the trip and kind of leading that component of it is huge. So I can focus on knowing the individuals coming from Vermont Adaptive and helping them with their daily tasks.
We talk about basic layering, rationing your food, cleaning up after yourself, packing out your trash. These are things that are very important and very present in the outdoors in the wilderness. And they're things that you can also bring home.
Accessibility in the outdoors gives everyone the opportunity to share the experiences in nature. It gets them out of their normal routine and doing something different that maybe their family or friends may not experience with them.
I just love living in
obtain information into this
really big ego science brain. So, in order to make a fire, folks, we need three things: oxygen, carbon, and heat. Those three things make a fire. I didn't expect that it would be so new and transformative for a lot of the students and participants that just 3 days could be like a really powerful experience.
The educational piece of the forest program is to make sure that we're building ambassadors for the outdoors. We want people to come out here, fall in love with the outdoors, and look after them.
How do you access something like this for like a school group?
Yeah, we should talk. We have Mansfield autoplay. We have, we can do that. That's what we do. Yeah, so we've worked with a few teen centers, Kingdom Elementary up in the NEK. But basically we kind of vet the program or the instructor or instructors who would be participating and go through intake process. So yeah, you can email us or email me, whatever, and then we'll make it happen.
Awesome.
Yeah, we try to do our goal. We haven't hit our goal because it's been hard to actually find educators who have availability. But we're trying to do 8 forest programs at each hut. So at Gingerbread and Grove, the 2 huts that we own and operate.
And you do it in the summer too?
We do them in summer as well. Yeah, that video just happened to occur in it was March, I think, and the weather wasn't great, but kids had fun. And this is a separate forest. This is actually our very first forest program, Middlebury Teen Center, out of Middlebury. And Christopher Russell, the instructor, came over and kind of did a naturalist guide this particular weekend. Again, that was the first one we ran just before the pandemic in whenever that happened. We blanked it out. Yeah, so I don't know. Happy to answer questions and talk more about everything we're doing. It's a lot. I think I probably left out a whole bunch, but maybe you guys will prompt those discussions in a rich Q&A session.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You were talking about Velomont. I wasn't sure. You said there were 3 phases. I wasn't sure what phase you're in, and then like the general timetable.
Yeah, great question. I don't even remember saying that, but you're absolutely right. We're in phase 1, which, if you think about it geographically, will connect from Reedsboro to Dover. That's section A of phase 1. Section B would be Mendon to here, like Waitsfield. And section C is from Johnson to St. Johnsbury via the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, which already exists. So where we're at in phase 1 is pretty far along the way. We have just about all the permits in place to connect Mendon, which is Rutland area, to here on mostly public land. There is a stretch between Randolph and Warren that will be a mix of state and private. But we have a good chunk of the funding to build that on federal lands. And the southern section from Reedsboro to roughly Dover, a big chunk of that's going to be co-located with the Catamount Trail. So that's existing tread that we're going to just improve to make it suitable for year-round usage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the
So it's
phases
not-
are geographical.
Yeah, geographically. And the reason we staged it that way was because we tried to identify like the low-hanging fruit across the state in phase 1. So what exists, what existing infrastructure is there that we can utilize? That's kind of been our philosophy from the start. Is we're not going to build 485 miles of brand new trail. That's insane. That would cost way too much money. It already costs way too much money. But that would be wild. So we're utilizing Catamount Trail where it's appropriate, existing PIMBA chapters where it works. I'd say we're about 3 to 4 years from completing phase one, including the huts that will support that connectivity. Yeah.
So, just curious about your funding sources.
Yeah.
What are your funding sources, and how do you go about it?
You want to make a donation? No. Our mix is right now heavy on federal grants. So we won 2 larger federal grants, a $2.5 million grant. Thank you, Senator Leahy, for trail construction on federal lands that's flowing to the Blue Mountain National Forest. We then, the following year, so that occurred in FY22, fiscal year 22, and in fiscal year 23, won a $3.8 million federal grant that's going to flow through HUD to fund a number of huts and hostels along that corridor. There's still a lot of money that needs to be raised. We have to match that $2.5 million with a 20% non-federal match, so that's $500,000 that we need right there, just for the trail. That's just the trail on federal land. So there's a trail that I talked about that's also on private land. We can't use those federal dollars on private land. And on the HUD side, I can go through the budget with you.
So like the 20%, is that municipal money or private
No.
donations? Or?
It can be, yeah, so it's foundation grants, private donations, matching volunteer hours, in-kind materials can count toward that federal match. But yeah, we're very much kind of restricted in how those particular dollars are spent. Yeah.
So does that mean the huts that you've currently built are paid for? There's no overhead?
They're paid for, the construction is paid for, there is overhead to operate those huts. We have a caretaker who visits our huts weekly. Those are independent contractors, and they check on the systems, make sure things are in good working order, that guests have their trash in place, which, knock on wood, has never happened. All guests are like super respectful. We're trying to create new stewards of the land, and that's been happening. But no, they do have overhead.
So the plan is not to have somebody on site in the huts. It's really kind of a
Self-service. The backcountry huts are self-service right now. The downtown hostels will have a staff member, at least part-time there, in those town centers. There's a scenario in the future that may have a hut host, either, the huts are small relative to, like, this is 640 square feet, look at the floor plans. That lives somewhere here and probably on this machine, but they're not like your AMC huts or your main huts where there's ample space for a caretaker. We really kind of wanted to keep them small and in line with the landscape of Vermont. But in the future, when we're talking about multi-day trips and connectivity and inclusivity, maybe you can rent just a bed out and not the whole hut. But in that scenario, you're going to need someone on site to facilitate those different user groups interacting with one another for safety reasons, for sanitary reasons, etc. It gets a little more complicated. So, yeah, we'll evolve.
What's the pricing on the huts?
Yeah, good question. So there's 15 huts in the network in total, and 2 of them we own and operate. We manage reservations for about, let's say, 9 others, and then there's 4-ish or 5-ish others that are kind of standalone that we just market and promote. Our Chittenden Brook Hut, I think the cheapest rate in the weekend during summer is like $70 or $80 a night, and the most expensive is $170 for a weekend night in the winter. Demand is just higher in the winter, but it sleeps 10 people. So does Grout Pond sleeps 10 people. So if you're there with friends, it's very affordable. But again, if you're there as just one family, maybe it's not. So we're always trying to figure out ways to make it a more inclusive experience. There is one hut in our network that's a partner hut that's like $300 a night, but it's like very swank, and they did an incredible job with the build, and we don't control their rates, so, but they're in the network, and it's a really great spot. So.
Have you scoped the trail in the valley?
Yeah, so I haven't personally, but
There's like a scoping study that's been going on.
exactly, yeah. So the Velomont will come right through the valley. I think it's probably going to utilize at least some section of the path here and there. Yeah, Hudson Valley, I think the nearest hut that would be in the works, would probably be down at Blueberry Lake. We have to go through NEPA on that, it'll be on federal land most likely. So that scoping will start probably next summer or fall. Yeah, for that, at least on our end. And then, you know, the valley has multiple lodging accommodations, so, maybe there's an opportunity for something more affordable that we can play a role in, but, I think for now, the nearest hub would likely be, yeah, down from Blueberry Lake, if we can get that through NEPA.
So working with Mad River Line as well?
We will be, yeah, yep, we'll do that. Yeah, we try, we always, you know, if there's a local chapter, whether it be on the bike or, seafront, that, like, we start there, you know, is there even a need or a desire for that? And when we first kind of created that undulating blog, back then it was, John Atkinson, who was the head of the writers, and so, there was, at least at that point, a desire for a hut back there somewhere.
They've been very active.
Yeah.
I have a question. You may have covered this, but with that 485
Yes.
mile vision, do you have a time frame when you're hoping to have all of that? I mean, I know it's a good question.
No, so many factors play a role in when that could be completed, but if we had a goal of like 10 to 15 years, but the reality is, it all comes down to funding, as you know, and if we get a big funding victory, then we can kind of move the needle a bit more and more quickly. Permitting can also get dragged out, it always does. But yeah, I think 10 to 15 years is not unrealistic. It took, let's see, the Catamount Trail was, when did that vision curve, like an 80s, and it finished it in early aughts, I think, of this millennium. Yeah, so a few decades is reasonable for the pace in Vermont. Yeah, it's a big project, and it'll be the, you know, not to knock any of the existing trails, but just due to the regulatory landscape we currently live in now in Vermont, I mean, this will be the most well thought out and well planned multi-use trail that probably nationwide is finished. It will traverse state, federal, and private lands, municipal lands, multiple different trail tread surfaces, and multiple user groups. So it's very well planned. We just finished a vision plan in June, so we have a lot of what we need to now implement. Fundraiser, that implement.
Is the whole trail network marked with like a unifying blaze or something?
Yes, part of that vision plan was wayfinding and signage. And so, do I have one? Probably not on this deck, but yeah, it's not there. Maybe it's over here. No. There's one, and they're up now. And this Heart of the Greenswood basis, yeah.
Okay.
It's basically this blaze right there
Yeah.
on the trees, kind of like you would see on the Catamount Trail, the Long Trail.
Right.
Yeah, and they'll be co-located with, if it's an existing trail, you'll also see that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because going to his question, I think that was the trip up.
Where?
Borrowing or whatever you were
Yeah.
just saying.
Yeah,
Borrowing
there's
trails
some
from other chapters.
Exactly.
That can get confusing.
Yeah.
You can ride for days on Mad River Rider trails, but if there's one specific network that's part of Velomont.
Right, yeah, one connection, yeah, so it'll be marked with this place, and it's like 4 inches by 3 or something,
Oh.
yeah, it's out there now. And you can see, like, it'll all be available digitally as well, like, you can download the GPS line shapefile, so you can track it on your phone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Are there similar projects in other parts of the country that we should have?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we still look to other parts of the country to see like how things are playing out. There's a Timbers Trail on Oregon that's gonna be like 700 something miles. They're allegedly gonna have huts along the way as well, so they'll steal that tagline of largest hut supported trail system. If they do that, and I hope they do, because that would be super cool. There's the Bailey's Trail system in Ohio. That's roughly 80-ish miles of multi-use trail engineered for mountain biking. Doesn't have a hut system with it, but it is on federal land. There's hut systems in Colorado that exist, but they're not really connected in any real significant way via multi-use trail. What's the other one that's going on? I feel like I'm missing a few, but there's a couple, yeah. But on the East Coast, there's nothing like this happening on the East Coast for multi-use trail and hut systems. If you guys have questions about, like, I know we're talking a lot about the trail and connectivity, but if you have other questions about, like, how to design build school, any of that stuff, happy to put that hut hat back on and talk about that too.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about how you're gonna build the rest of the huts, and if you'll continue to partner with groups like BYCC and tomorrow locally, and
Yeah.
what's that gonna look like?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's gotta be like all of the above when
Yeah.
it comes to building it out, especially if we, have some of these funding opportunities that have hard deadlines on them, which they all do. We've got a newish hut design that is a bit more simple, and we can kind of deploy over and over again. As you saw, like, both of those huts were built kind of with the site in mind, as it should be, but there's a lot of efficiencies to be gained by just coming up with a pretty homogeneous design that maybe is tweaked a little bit here and then, and the finishing looks a little different from hut to hut, but yeah, I think the plan is to get to a point where we can maybe build panelized huts perhaps, or at least huts that are in sections and can be transported into the backcountry a bit easier than, not every site has the access that Jim and Brook Hut has, so that you can get a crane and a huge trip. You probably shouldn't ever take a crane back there, but we did, and it worked. So yeah, coming up with a way to become more efficient at building and deploying the structures is where we're heading. I think we're close.
Can you talk a little bit about the septic or the power, water
Yeah.
that you're
Sure.
thinking about?
Yeah, they're all off-grid, so none of them have any utility services. The new huts that we build, both the Grout Pond and Jim Brook Hut, all new huts moving forward they have solar, so it's usually just like a 2 to 4 panel system, so maybe 400 watts. Lithium batteries, maybe we'll get solid state batteries if that tech ever happens. So safety, no need for candles or weird dated lighting systems. Their water sources is a nearby, usually stream or pond, that users gather that for their drinking water to filter or boil it. And the gray water is just broadcast into the forest as you would if you were camping. That's the best practice. And then as far as human waste, we use, it depends on the site, but Chittenden Brook has a vaulted privy, so that just means there's like a tank underground that gets pumped annually because it's shared with existing other campsites during the summer. And we use moldering privies, batch bin systems. There's a relatively new urine diversion system that we're going to be deploying on the private land in Moortown, and then hopefully in other areas where it diverts the solid from liquids, which is not new, but the way in which they separate it is new, and that waste then composts much quicker, the solids, and the urine can, if it can, be accessed with a truck or a small truck. They pump that out and turn it into fertilizer for use wherever they need that fertilizer, or we could go to a micro leach field, which would be wastewater permit I think they just did one there. Yeah, it's called Wasted Earth.
Demonstration.
Yeah, Wasted Earth, and it's the off-grid system. It's basically a conveyor belt, so this is where it gets real fun. Poop and parking are the two things that can make or break a trail and hut system. Yeah, so you do your business on effectively a conveyor belt, and you use a pedal to move that conveyor into the drop zone. And
I saw a video about that recently on the Chamber of Commerce, did an interview with Misha Goff and Maverick Pat.
yeah,
It's a really good demonstration. Good.
yeah, it's cool. I am eager to put it to use.
Right? I think that's gonna run into design.
And we
Build.
built,
And
The enclosure.
uh-huh.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we just built an enclosure. Our project manager and volunteers up in Moortown at a parcel that's going to come online with a little yurt this winter. It's simple, and it seems to be effective. It can handle high volumes because it's separated with liquids.
Our structure is a relatively religious experience, so it was called the Pistine Chapel.
It's great fun.
There's a rose window made out of stained glass and an old bicycle spoke.
It's amazing. Yeah.
More about the huts, like the heating, do you have a layout of example of one?
I could totally dive into that. So we talk about inclusivity and accessibility, and that leads us to how are you going to heat your structures. Both huts that are on federal land are heated with propane, which hurts me to say that because we live in Vermont, it's forested, it's a local resource. But not everyone's familiar with how to operate a wood stove, and so that presents a bit of a barrier, not just from a safety standpoint, but I don't want to camp in the winter in a forest, what if I can't get the fire, etc. So those are both heated with propane. I think all the other huts though, our partner huts, are heated with wood. Yeah. So it's an ongoing conversation for future huts on federal land. It was a conversation we had at the outset with the Vermont National Forest. They actually prefer that we heat with propane for those reasons. Yeah. It's slightly easier to manage from an operating standpoint as well. It's easier to haul 4 propane tanks in and out versus 3 cords of wood. That said, there's wood all around, and if we could harvest it from that site, then it would be way easier justification, but we can't actually harvest it on site. It would require a very different permit, and it would be very boring to talk about it, so I'll stop with that.
And there's also the cooking capacity, at least in the chimney room.
Of course, sorry, yeah, these huts have a little kitchenette which has a 4-burner propane cooktop. So the huts, we really want folks to just be able to travel lightly and not be intimidated by a bunch of gear that they need to purchase. So the huts have, your nice little mattress, the little kitchenette has pots, pans, utensils, plates, bowls, and a cooktop. So it allows you to prepare your meals and not have to invest in hundreds of dollars of backcountry camping gear, which is great. It's interesting. For some folks, the hut is their stepping stone to getting into that type of adventure. For other folks, man, what was I thinking all those years sleeping on the ground and then looking at the hut? So it's cool to have both ends of the, and not to generalize, but it's usually in some cases my in-laws who are now in their 70s, we're cool with backcountry camping. Can we just go to the hut with the grandkids instead? I don't know how many people in here enjoy sitting on the ground. I still do, but that'll probably change.
I have a question about the multi-use nature of the trail.
Yeah.
And as you're building this trail, you're not, like you were saying, you're not building a brand new trail. You're collaborating with other existing trails and figuring that out. Have you had to negotiate or compromise or have conversations with single-use trails about making them into a multi-use trail?
Totally. Yeah, it's a really good question. So, there are big areas of connectivity that are just no man's land. There's nothing there. there, so we are building a new trail, but it's a multi-use trail in those areas. But, for example, Catamount Trail, like southern Vermont, where it's co-located, there's a feel and an experience that a winter user gets on that trail that we don't want to compromise that experience by widening the corridor any wider than it needs to be. So it requires maybe perhaps more of a scalpel approach when you're going through those areas and making sure that both the land manager and the trail manager, the lead trail manager, is comfortable with. So in those areas, there's a lot of hand-built section where if you are bringing, and these main excavators are, again, they're 36 or 40 inches wide, so they're tight. But just be more mindful of how you're constructing the trail. Yeah. And the goal is to have roughly 70 to 80% of this whole trail be single track, multi-use single track. So try to stay off the roads as much as we can, but bring the users into town. Yeah. I think we have a minute. I don't know. Yeah. Good.
We'll let you off the hook.
Yeah.
Thank you, RJ. And please stay tuned for, we have 3 more. Is that right, Sarah?
2 more.
2 more. And next week, we actually have an important announcement. Will you read what's on that poster?
Oh, yes.
5 o'clock before our
Yeah, next
speaker
week is a
series.
double feature. So at 5 o'clock will be the public meeting for the active transportation corridor that somebody heard about last week, and a little bit tonight. So community engagement is really important to that process. So please come and give your input about what that will look like. It'll be sort of like a drop-in event here where you can come and look at some maps and mark them up, and not a lecture style, but more like a mingling, looking at stuff style. And then at 6:30, we'll have Dave Roberts from Efficiency Vermont talking about e-bikes and e-vehicles. So we're going to get into some driving for the first time in this series about transportation, but the electric kind. And then the last talk on the 20th will be about public transportation with Ross McDonald from E-Trans.
So keep coming back. RJ, thanks again.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
Yeah, great.